Imagine being tied up in a sack with a monkey, a dog, a rooster and a snake, and then tossed into a river. No, that's not a nightmare after watching too much late-night Animal Planet. That was a very real Roman punishment. Welcome to history's greatest hits of human cruelty, where rulers and executioners competed in a kind of America's Got Torture Talent contest. Today, we're diving into execution methods so brutal, so creatively disturbing, that even the societies who came up with them eventually said, okay, yeah, that's too much. Rome's Sack of Doom. Let's start with the Romans, because of course we are. These guys had crucifixion, wild animal fights, public beheadings, you name it. But their pièce de résistance of nightmare fuel was called poena culae, which literally means penalty of the sack. If you killed your parents, a crime the Romans considered the absolute worst, they didn't just kill you back. Oh no, they stuffed you into a leather sack with a live dog, a monkey, a rooster and a snake. Then they threw the whole wriggling bundle into a river. That wasn't punishment. It was a chaotic zoo exhibit gone nuclear. The Roman writer Modestinus described it as a punishment more dreadful than death itself. Yeah, you don't say. Imagine the poor executioners chasing around the forum trying to wrangle a monkey and a rooster into the same bag. That alone should have been enough punishment for everyone involved. Crushed by elephant. Meanwhile, over in South and Southeast Asia, kings had a different idea. Use an elephant as your executioner. And let's be real, if you want to make a statement about power, nothing says, I'm in charge, like commanding a 10,000-pound animal to squash your enemies like grapes. Reports from Sri Lanka and India describe trained elephants that could crush a prisoner instantly. Or, if the ruler wanted more entertainment, break their limbs one by one before finishing the job. The Portuguese traveller Duarte Barbosa wrote in the 1500s that the elephants were so well trained, they would drag the condemned around the arena before crushing them. Like, imagine SeaWorld, but if Shamu was actively working through anger issues. This method eventually fell out of favour not because it was cruel, but because it made rulers look uncivilised in the eyes of European colonisers. Which is rich considering Europe was still breaking people on wheels at the time. The Swamp Buffet. Now let's head to Persia, where they came up with a punishment that honestly sounds like a rejected Fear Factor episode. Scaphism, also known as the boats. Here's how it worked. The condemned was strapped between two hollowed-out logs, so their head, arms and legs stuck out but their body was trapped. Then they were force-fed milk and honey until they couldn't keep it down. Their skin was also smeared with honey to attract insects. And then, they were floated out into a swamp and left to nature's mercy. Greek historians like Plutarch described victims surviving for days, slowly being eaten alive by insects, vermin and whatever else thought, hey, free buffet. One account tells of a Persian soldier named Mithridates, condemned under King Artaxerxes II. According to witnesses, it took him 17 days to die. 17 days. Forget waterboarding, this was slow-motion human composting. Viking horror show. Of course, the Vikings weren't about to be left out of the most metal punishment contest. Enter the legendary Blood Eagle. According to Norse sagas, victims were laid face down, their ribs hacked open and their lungs pulled out and draped over their shoulders like a gruesome pair of wings. Allegedly, this was done to traitors or unlucky enemy nobles. Now, historians argue whether the Blood Eagle was ever actually performed, or if medieval Christian writers just wanted to make Vikings look extra monstrous. But here's the thing, even the fact that people believed it could happen tells you how terrifying Viking justice was. A 12th century chronicler described it in detail and basically said, yeah, the lungs flapping outside the body, definitely a thing. Whether or not it happened, the Blood Eagle lives on as one of history's nastiest branding campaigns. Rats, rats, rats. And then there's rat torture, cheap, easy and guaranteed to turn your stomach. Versions of this popped up in China, later spread into medieval Europe, and even appeared in early modern inquisitions. The setup was simple. Strap the victim down, place a rat in a metal cage on their stomach, and then heat the cage. Rats, being survivalists, do the only logical thing. They start digging their way out, through the victim. In the 17th century, Dutch prisoners of war described seeing fellow captives subjected to this in South America. One noted, the rat burrowed quickly, and the man screamed like no man should. And just like that, you have a torture method that doubles as the worst possible carnival game. 1,000 cuts. Moving on to Imperial China, we find one of the most infamous punishments ever invented. Lingchi, or death by 1,000 cuts. This wasn't just poetic, it was literal. Victims were tied to a post, and the executioner would slice small pieces of flesh off, one after another, sometimes for hours. The idea wasn't just to kill you, but to degrade you, to erase your body bit by bit. French missionary accounts from the late 1800s describe seeing this punishment firsthand. One missionary wrote of a condemned man in Beijing who smiled under the knife, for he had been promised opium to numb his suffering. Whether that smile was relief or delirium, we'll never know. Lingchi was outlawed in 1905 after international outrage, and probably because photographs of it started circulating, horrifying people across the globe. For once, technology actually saved lives. Breaking on the wheel? Back in Europe, people got their own brand of gruesome, breaking on the wheel. Picture a giant wagon wheel, but instead of carrying grain, it's carrying your broken body. The condemned was tied to the wheel and an executioner systematically smashed their bones with an iron bar. Sometimes they'd finish you off with a mercy blow to the chest. Other times, you were just left there, a broken human pretzel, to slowly die in public. The French execution of Robert-François Damiens in 1757, the guy who tried to assassinate Louis XV, is one of the most notorious. He was tortured, broken on the wheel, and then dismembered. Witnesses wrote that the execution was so botched, the crowd actually begged the executioners to hurry it up. When 18th century Parisians, a crowd that normally loved a good public spectacle, say, "Okay, this is too much. You know you've crossed a line." There are so many more nightmare methods we could cover, but let's run through a few greatest hits. The Brazen Bull of ancient Greece, where victims were roasted alive inside a hollow brass bull while their screams echoed through pipes to sound like bellowing. Fun twist, the inventor who pitched it to the tyrant Phalaris was executed inside his own invention. Talk about bad product testing. Then there's sawing in half, victims suspended upside down, sawed straight down the middle, reportedly used in both Europe and Asia. Honestly, that one needs no embellishment. And my personal favourite for sheer poetic irony, molten gold. The Romans and later the Mongols poured molten metal down the throats of greedy nobles. Because if you love gold so much, why not wear it? On the inside, what all these punishments have in common is that they weren't just about killing someone, they were about sending a message. They were theatre, they were politics, they were rulers saying, "Fear me, because this could be you." But eventually, even the bloodthirstiest societies realised they'd gone too far. Not out of mercy, mind you, usually because it was messy, inefficient, or it risked turning the crowd's stomach against the executioners. Nothing ruins a good monarchy like your subjects muttering, "Yikes, this guy's unhinged." Don't forget to comment, like and subscribe. And remember, the next time you complain about jury duty or grumble about a parking ticket, be thankful that at least nobody's sewing you into a sack with a rooster.